Hello and welcome to my first ASMR video. Today I'd like to show you how to create a budget using the principles of accounting, or what are better known as debits and credits. So before we can start making our budget, let's go over the basics. One of the fundamentals of accounting is this: the accounting equation, or assets equals liabilities plus equity. You can also think of it as equity equals assets minus liabilities. So first, what are assets? You can think of assets as something that contributes value. For example, to a business. Assets can be tangible, like cash, or a car, or a machine. But they can also be intangible, like a trademark or a patent, or even if you expect to receive money from something. So, using the principles of accounting, assets increase with a debit and decrease with a credit. Next are liabilities. You can think of liabilities as something that inhibits value. For example, a credit card or a loan, or if you owe someone money. You can think of it that the money you owe is not an asset because you're planning to get rid of it. So, liabilities will increase with a credit and decrease with a debit. Now, for our purposes, assets and liabilities are all that we'll need to know about when making our budget, but for clarity, we'll talk about equity as well. You can think of equity as a retention of value. For example, if you own a house, and you have a mortgage, as you pay your mortgage, the bank owns less and less of your house. Conversely, you own more and more of your house as you owe less money to the bank. So your liability, which is your mortgage, decreases and your equity increases. Same as with equity. Same with liabilities. Equity increases with a credit and decreases with a debit. But there are also expenses and revenues, which may seem a little counterintuitive, but that's just the way it works. So expenses will increase with debits and decrease with credits. Revenues are the opposite. They'll increase with credits and decrease with debits. The most important thing to know, as with any equation, is that everything is always balanced. So with this in mind, let's work on our budget. So what I have set up here is a worksheet. Let's say that you have a checking account, a savings account, and a credit card. Your checking account and your savings account are assets. It's cash that you can have. You can take it out of the bank at an ATM. You can count it. It's yours. On the other hand, you have a credit card. It's not an asset. This is not your money, but money that you borrow from the bank. This will increase with the credit. These two will increase with debits. Let's finish this sheet by first putting some formulas in these balance columns. Based on what we talked about earlier, we know that assets increase with a debit. We'll start on the second cell so we can make a running formula. Formula will be what we started with plus any debits and minus any credits. We can copy this formula and paste it over here. Oops, I'm used to Excel. That just pasted a 0. Amazing. Let's try again. So these formulas are essentially the same. But for our credit card, things are different. We can do one of two things. We can report the balance as a negative and use the same equation, or report it as a positive and flip the operations. For clarity's sake, we'll use the same equation and use negative numbers. Okay. Last thing we want to do is format our sheet. Highlight the whole thing. And we'll set it to financial. I don't like using accounting or currency because the dollar sign can become annoying. So our starting balances, for simplicity's sake, are zeros. Poor financial standing. So, let's say we're starting on a new year. It's the beginning of January. And let's say you work as, could be anything. You could be a doctor, work at Starbucks, an accountant, a teacher. Maybe you're self-employed, make YouTube videos or art, music, whatever. It's up to you. But let's say, for our example, that you make $60,000 a year and you get paid once a month. So, on January 1st, 2025, you get paid for the first time. Let's calculate that amount. So, $5,000 a year, paid once every month. There are 12 months in a year, so you're paid $5,000. And you can see with our formula that it updated. We have $5,000 in our checking account. Now it'd be nice to put this all in savings, but that's not the case. We have bills to pay. But let's start by saving a little on the same day. Let's say you try to save 20% from each paycheck. So take 20% multiplied by this amount, $1,000. Now we'll click and drag our formula. Now, where does this $1,000 go? Well, it's going to go into our savings account. If you remember what I said before, everything is always balanced. For every debit, there must be an equal credit. In our case, we're crediting this asset to decrease it. So we'll debit this asset, our savings account, to increase it by the same number. Click and drag our formula. Update that one as well. And there you go. Now, let's say you live in the city and you rent an apartment. It's a nice apartment. It's got a kitchen and a living room, a nice bedroom, and even an office. You've worked very hard to move to the city and get your own place. In the United States, rent is due on the first of the month, typically. So, let's record that. Now, let's say you are trying to build some credit. So you plan to put the balance on your credit card. Your rent is $1,500 a month. That's $1,500. But because you're using a credit card, it's going to cost a little extra. There's some fee. Now, since it's going on a credit card, you can think of it as borrowing money. So it's a liability. So it'll increase on the credit side. We'll take our $1,500 in rent and say that there's a 2% processing fee. We'll click and drag our formula. And we see a negative number because we chose to represent our liabilities as a credit, as a negative number. Click, drag, click, drag. Let's make sure we remember to pay this off in a few days. A few days pass. Let's say on the third day, you go shopping. buy some groceries for $200. If you live in the United States, it's very common to buy all your groceries at the beginning of the month for that month. But in other parts of the world, it's much more common to go shopping once every few days to buy enough groceries for a couple of days to keep things fresh. In any case, you spend $200 on groceries. Click, drag, click, drag. Then, on the 5th day, you have your subscriptions due, so that you can watch your shows or support your favorite ASMR YouTubers on Patreon. And let's say you put this on your credit card as well. $50 for the month. Click, drag, click, drag, click, drag. Then, let's say, on the 11th day, the 11th of January, you need to put gas in your car. And gas is very expensive. And your car is completely empty. Spend $60 on gas. Or petrol, depending on where you're from. Then, let's say you remember to pay off your credit card. On the 15th, you set a reminder on your phone to pay it off. Now, the money has to come from somewhere. In this case, as in most any other, you'll pay it out of your checking account. Fortunately, you haven't incurred any interest on your credit card, so you only need to pay $1,580. Click, drag. If we remember from our principles of accounting, liabilities decrease with their debits. So, we'll debit our credit card for this amount and pay it off. And so on and so forth. This method of budgeting can be very useful for those with several different accounts that like to keep track of their balances. It's also a good way to understand how money moves from place to place. It doesn't appear out of thin air, but it's moving. Even in cases such as this, there's no debit in our budget to balance this credit, but if we think about the grocery store, they received our $200. For them, that's cash, which is an asset. So they are the ones with the debit to balance. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully some of you find it relaxing, maybe even helpful for your future budgeting or finances, or even if you're an accountant, you may have found it refreshing. Thank you for watching,